while the United States had 21 warships enforcing a naval blockade in the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's foreign minister flew to St. Petersburg and sat down with Vladimir Putin for 90 minutes. Russia's defense minister met Iran's deputy defense minister the same day. Russia had already supplied military equipment to Iran throughout the war. Russia vetoed the UN resolution that would have protected international shipping. Russian ships were among the few permitted through the Iranian-controlled strait without restriction or toll, and the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, which pushed oil prices above $119 a barrel, generated hundreds of millions of dollars per day in additional revenue for Russia's war economy in Ukraine. Russia did not fire a single shot in this conflict. It did not need to. What Russia did to the United States in the Strait of Hormuz was more calculated, more consequential, and more dangerous than anything involving a weapon. On April 27th, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi arrived at the Boris Yeltsin Presidential Library in St. Petersburg for a face-to-face meeting with Vladimir Putin. This was not a routine diplomatic call. Araghchi had just come from a diplomatic sprint that took him through Islamabad, Oman, back to Pakistan, and then directly to Russia. He had passed Iran's formal list of red lines to Pakistan as a message for the United States, red lines that explicitly included nuclear issues and the Strait of Hormuz. He had spoken by phone with the foreign ministers of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Egypt, and after all of that, the first world leader he sat down with in person was Vladimir Putin. Putin opened the meeting by telling Araghchi he had received a message from Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, who has not been seen or heard from publicly since taking power, communicating only through written statements. Putin asked Araghchi to convey his gratitude and his best wishes for Khamenei's health and well-being. Then Putin said, on record, in front of cameras, "We see how courageously and heroically the Iranian people are fighting for their independence, for their sovereignty." He said Russia intends to maintain its strategic relations with Iran. He said Russia will do everything it can to support Tehran. This was Vladimir Putin, the leader of a permanent UN Security Council member state with nuclear weapons, publicly declaring his support for Iran in an active war against the United States and Israel. 2 days ago, at a presidential library in St. Petersburg, Araghchi responded by telling Putin that Iran-Russia relations are at their highest level and will continue to grow stronger regardless of everything that is happening. He said the Iranian president and supreme leader had both asked him to personally deliver their warmest wishes to Putin. He said Iran will continue along this path. The meeting lasted 90 minutes. The same day, Russian Defense Minister Andrei Belousov met separately with Iran's Deputy Defense Minister, Brigadier General Reza Talianik. Belousov issued a statement saying Russia supports resolving the conflict exclusively through diplomatic means, backs Iran's sovereignty and territorial integrity, and is ready to do everything possible to help resolve the situation. 2 simultaneous high-level meetings between Russian and Iranian military and diplomatic officials on the same day, while the US maintains an active naval blockade and active combat operations against Iran. The United States ambassador to the UN accused Russia at the Security Council of actively supplying military equipment to Iran during the conflict. That accusation was made publicly, on the record, and Russia did not deny it. Now go back to April 7th, because what Russia did at the UN that day is the foundation of everything that follows. Bahrain brought a resolution to the Security Council on behalf of the Gulf states. The resolution demanded Iran stop attacking commercial vessels and stop blocking the Strait of Hormuz. It had already been weakened 3 separate times before the vote, with all references to military force removed, the scope narrowed to the strait itself, and the language reduced to the mildest possible framing. Coordinated defensive efforts to ensure safe navigation, and a reaffirmation of the right of states to defend their vessels from attack. That is as close to a meaningless resolution as the UN drafts. 11 of 15 Security Council members voted yes. Russia vetoed it anyway. Russia's UN ambassador Vasily Nebenzia said the resolution was unbalanced, inaccurate, and confrontational. He said it framed Iran as the sole source of regional instability while ignoring the US and Israeli strikes that started the war. He said Russia and China would prepare an alternative resolution. That alternative has not materialized. What is materialized is that the only multilateral mechanism available to protect international shipping in the world's most important energy waterway was killed by a Russian veto, leaving the US with no legitimate multilateral framework to operate within which is precisely what Russia intended. The effect of that veto is visible in the shipping data. Before the war, approximately 3,000 vessels transited the Strait of Hormuz every month. In March, that number was 154. Traffic has been running at roughly 5% of its pre-war average. The official EMO shipping lane through the strait has been almost entirely abandoned. Most vessels that do transit are using the route designated by the RGC along the Iranian coastline, past Larak Island, where Iranian military personnel conduct cargo verification and clearance, and where Iran's toll booth system charges transit fees of up to $2 million per ship. The U.S. blockade, announced on April 13th, has directed at least 38 vessels to turn around. But tracking data shows that most ships transiting the strait in recent days are still following the Iran-designated route, and approximately half of them loaded their cargoes at Iranian ports. The blockade is partially working and partially not. Russia's veto is one of the primary reasons there is no international enforcement framework that would make it work more completely. Now the oil price. Brent crude exceeded $119 a barrel, its highest level since June 2022. Jet fuel prices rose 106.6% year-on-year. Before this war, Russia was selling oil into a market where OPEC Plus pricing and Western sanctions had already compressed its revenues. The Strait of Hormuz closure and the disruption of Gulf energy supplies sent global oil prices to levels Russia had not seen in 4 years. Every dollar added to the oil price meant additional revenue for Russia's war economy in Ukraine. Russia produces approximately 9 to 10 million barrels of oil per day. A $20 per barrel increase in the global benchmark translates to roughly $180 to $200 million per day in additional revenue for Russia. The Hormuz closure added far more than $20 to the price. Russia made hundreds of millions of dollars per day in additional oil revenue directly as a result of a crisis. It actively helped sustain by vetoing international solutions and providing diplomatic and military cover to Iran. An analyst at King's College London put it plainly in reporting by the Jerusalem Post. Propping up Iran locks in higher global oil prices that buoy Russia's war economy, cements Russia's dominance in Asian trade corridors, and keeps a key anti-Western ally alive. There is no downside for Moscow in a fragmented Gulf. That last part, the trade corridors, is the piece that receives the least attention and is strategically the most significant over the long term. The International North-South Transport Corridor, known as the INSTC, is a network of shipping lanes, railways, and roads linking Russia to Iran and onward to India and Asia, bypassing Western-controlled maritime routes entirely. Goods move from southern Russian ports across the Caspian Sea to northern Iranian ports, including Bandar Anzali, before continuing by rail or truck into Iran and onward south and east. Russia has been building up this corridor for years. The war has now given it strategic urgency, with 90% of Iran's international trade being maritime trade through the Gulf, which cannot quickly be replaced by land routes, according to Georgetown University Associate Professor Nader Hashemi. Russia's overland corridor cannot substitute for the Strait of Hormuz at scale, but it does not need to substitute at scale to be strategically valuable. It needs to keep Iran's economy breathing, give Iran a channel that the US cannot blockade, and deepen the economic dependency between Moscow and Tehran that makes Iran increasingly reliant on Russian goodwill for its survival. That dependency is exactly what the St. Petersburg meeting formalized. Iran's foreign minister flew to Russia carrying the new supreme leader's personal message to Putin. Iran's delegation included Qasem Jalali, the architect of the 2025 Comprehensive Strategic Partnership Treaty between Iran and Russia, and nuclear technocrat Qasem Garibabadi. The composition of the delegation tells you what Iran was there to discuss: the future of the strategic partnership, the nuclear file, and how Russia intends to help Iran survive the blockade. Arakchi said relations between the two countries are at their highest level in history. He said they will continue to grow stronger regardless of everything that is happening. That phrase, regardless of everything that is happening, is Iran acknowledging that it is in an existential fight and that Russia is the partner it is counting on most, which raises the obvious question: why is Iran going to Moscow more than Beijing? The answer is revealing. China, despite buying over 90% of Iran's illicit oil exports and vetoing the same UN resolution, has chosen strategic detachment. China's approach, as the Middle East Monitor analysis published today explained, is economic pragmatism over alliance commitment. China imports roughly 13% of its total oil through the Strait of Hormuz, making stability there more important to Beijing than to Moscow. China has backed Pakistan's mediation role and outsourced its diplomatic involvement to Islamabad rather than engaging directly, because Beijing does not want to risk a direct confrontation with Washington over Iran's survival. China's tankers run the blockade. China's diplomats stay at arm's length. Russia's posture is the opposite. Putin is the one sitting across from Iran's foreign minister for 90 minutes, saying courageously and heroically on camera, receiving personal messages from the supreme leader, and having his defense minister meet Iran's deputy defense minister the same afternoon. The reason Russia is more willing to take this visible supportive role is that Russia has less to lose from US economic retaliation than China does, is already in an effectively adversarial relationship with Washington over Ukraine, and has far more to gain from Iran's survival and the continuation of high oil prices than from a diplomatic resolution that reopens the strait and brings prices back down. Russia wins if the war continues. Russia wins if the blockade fails. Russia wins if Iran retains control of the strait and the toll booth system becomes permanent. Russia wins if the NSTC becomes a permanent pillar of Eurasian trade. Every outcome that is bad for the United States in the Strait of Hormuz is good for Russia. The US is aware of this. Secretary of State Rubio said Russia's support for Iran during the UN debate was directly undermining the ability to reach a diplomatic solution. The US ambassador accused Russia of supplying military equipment to an active adversary. Trump has not publicly addressed the Russia-Iran relationship directly in the context of the Hormuz crisis, which is notable given that he is simultaneously conducting trade negotiations with Beijing and has a scheduled state visit to China next month. The political constraints on calling out Russia and China directly over their Hormuz role while managing those separate bilateral relationships are real and are shaping US public messaging in ways that understate what is actually happening. What actually happened was that Russia ran a multi-track operation against the United Biash in the Strait of Hormuz without deploying a single military asset to the region. It supplied Iran with weapons. It provided diplomatic cover at the UN. It hosted Iran's foreign minister for a visible show of solidarity. It had its defense minister meet Iran's deputy defense minister the same day. It kept the NSDC corridor open as an economic lifeline that bypassed the blockade. It profited from the oil price spike caused by the closure, and it vetoed the one international mechanism that could have created a legitimate multilateral framework for reopening the waterway. The blockade CNN described as not quite working was not quite working partly because of Russia. The shipping data showing that most vessels still followed the Iranian-designated route reflected Russian success as much as American failure. Iran could not sustain this war economically, diplomatically, and militarily without Russia. The Strait could not remain under Iranian control without Russia's UN veto protecting that control from multilateral challenge. And Russia did not need to fire a shot, board a ship, or send a warship to the Gulf to make all of that true. Putin sat in the Boris Yeltsin Presidential Library in St. Petersburg on April 27th and told Iran's foreign minister that the Iranian people were fighting courageously and heroically for their sovereignty. He said it in public, on camera, with Sergei Lavrov beside him. He was not speaking to Arakchi. He was speaking to Washington. The message was that Russia had chosen its side in the Strait of Hormuz, that it intended to keep Iran viable, and that the cost of reopening the world's most important energy waterway ran directly through Moscow. That is what Russia did to the United States, and the US has not found an obvious answer for it.